Our different breed types, we're going to hit on these briefly. We've got our British, American, and Continental would be our three main breed types. The British, the Angus cattle are known for their marbling and maternal ability. The Continental, an example would be the Charolais breed, and those cattle are known for their growth and performance and red meat yield there. And then our American breeds, example would be our Brahma and our Brangus. Those cattle are typically, we think of them as our maternal breeds in the cattle that we produce in the southern portion of the United States, where we may have some hotter, more stressful type environments. Just to give you an idea, and we'll talk on breeds and all the other breeds that are predominant in the United States as we get into the breeds lecture. Just some numbers on breeds, and going back to the 2011 registrations, Angus is big, almost 300,000 registrations in that year. And again, that's not all the animals, all the Angus cattle that are out there. That's just the number of registrations, which gives you an idea of how many purebred animals are produced each year from those breeds. And it gives you an idea of how they're used in the commercial side. So the Angus is big, and it goes back to the Certified Angus Beef program and that marketing program. Hereford, Red Angus, and Shorthorn are next. You can see our American breeds, a lot lower numbers, but they are a very popular breed in the South. And we see lots of those cattle in the South there. And then you can see our Continental breeds. As you can see there, Charolais, number 1, Simmental, Limousin, just to give you an idea of some of those numbers of those cattle right there. And again, those numbers going back to 2011. The other breed we talk about and we see in Texas, as you can see, not a lot of numbers of registrations. Oftentimes to the outsider coming to Texas, we think of, or the outsider looking at beef production, we think of the Longhorn as being the big player in the big beef production animal, and they're really not in today's beef industry because they just don't have the pounds of red meat yield per animal that the other breeds that are available have today. And so they're more of a specialty breed we think of, as people like to have, as I call sometimes yard art, or utilized for sporting events, so those types of things. Or our fellow university down the road, University of Texas, that's their mascot, as you can see right there. So Texas Longhorns are really not a player in the beef industry in Texas, and actually those cattle are discounted pretty heavily if you're going into the traditional beef production chain there. And so we've talked a lot about cow-calf, where essentially the gestation's 283 days. The cow has the calf naturally. Hopefully, we wean that animal at about 9 months of age, or around 7 months of age, and then we move into the feeding period, or the growing, and then finally into the feed yard after that. You'll see this economic model quite a bit during this lecture, and whenever I'm talking about management practices at the cow-calf level, we throw up this economic model. And it's very simple, but essentially you can see we've got our production inputs, or what our costs are, and then we see the middle box is weaned calf crop, pounds at weaning, and price per pound. Those three factors, you multiply them together, that gives us about somewhere around 75-80% of our income on the ranch from the calf crop. The balance of that income comes from our market cows and market bulls, so the animals the breeding animals that we cull. And so those three factors multiplied together give us the bulk of our income on the ranch. Now, sometimes we get hung up and we say, well, price is most important, or pounds is most important. In reality, if you want to emphasize one, weaning is going to be the most, weaned calf crop is going to be the most important of those three. Again, it's a balanced approach. In some areas, we may be able to produce the highest price calf. Some areas we may not because of our production conditions, but at the same time, our production inputs may be a lot lower. And so it's a balanced approach, and every ranch is going to have a little bit different picture of this economic model. And I think that's the thing that you got to think about. And every time we talk about a management practices in this class, or if I'm talking to a group of ranchers, we're going to be talking about weaned calf crop, times pounds at weaning, times price per pound, and how whatever management practice we incorporate or change, how it could influence those three things, and then ultimately the bottom line. So keep that in mind. That's a pretty important part. When we get into breeds, and we're going to talk about this in the genetics side, what breed type, well, at the end of the day, it comes down to figure out what cow matches your environment, and then figure out what breed of bull to breed to her to produce a calf to fit the market. And we'll talk about that extensively as we get into the genetics side. All right, now as we move from the cow-calf side of the business, and that's in this particular class, we'll spend most of our time at the cow-calf side, getting that calf produced to weaning, and we'll spend a lot of time on genetics and reproduction and nutrition, and then ultimately marketing that animal. And then we'll highlight towards the end of the course, we'll get into the stocker and feeding phase. But I want to give you a hit up front in the class to talk a little bit about the stocker operations. And again, in the stocker or the grazing portion of the industry, this segment is all about producing pounds on forages. Or some type of forage-based system there with minimal feed inputs there. Some of these forage conditions may require some supplemental feeding, and it may pencil out. The price may be right to do that, or the cost may be acceptable for that. But we place these calves on winter or summer forage or some other type of commodity for 4 to 5 months before they go into the feed yard. And we're producing a calf from weaning to 600 to 900, maybe 1,000 pounds, depending on the production system. They're primarily on roughages or grass, and they could be improved or native pastures where gains may be as low as 3/4 to a pound a day, all the way to wheat, oats, ryegrass, where gains could be really good, could be as high as 3 pounds a day. And so there's lots of options and grazing strategies out there. Again, at the end of the day, on the stocker side is looking at, well, what is it costing us to put that additional pound on that animal and what the value of that pound is. So you'll see a lot of different types and kinds of stocker enterprises scattered across the United States. Here's a stocker operation, again, winter pasture, as we look at in central Texas, around the Austin area. This is a stocker operation on some ryegrass pastures in northeast Texas, around Athens, Texas. And these cattle were actually grazing this as we moved into December of that year. Here's some cattle on some improved Bermuda grass variety called Tifton 85. And this would be in Overton, Texas, so this would be in East Texas. So you'd see some of these conditions during the summertime as we move east from central Texas all the way to the eastern coast. So a lot of different types, and then we also see a lot of cattle that are grazed on other cover crops as well as maybe some residues. And so they've gone in, they've harvested the corn or some other commodity, and so they'll run some stocker cattle to get any leftover grasses or grain or anything else out of there. Then we go to the stocker, then we move into the feeding side. And again, as we move and we transition from cow-calf to stocker to the finishing, there are a small percentage of ranchers that will own cattle all the way through. But a lot of times these cattle are going to be sold at weaning. They may be sold to a different individual at the stocker phase. That individual may or may not keep those animals and own them through the feeding. If they don't, they may be sold to a feed yard or to another investor as well to finish out their lifetime.